Fala galera, tudo bem com vocês? Eu me chamo Patrick e vocês estão no canal War News. E no vídeo de hoje vocês verão um gringo falando do Brasil durante a Segunda Guerra Mundial, como foi a atuação do Brasil durante esse conflito e principalmente como foi o posicionamento político do então presidente da época, que era o Getúlio Vargas, e como que ele era habilidoso politicamente falando, como ele era um cara muito astuto. Mas vocês vão ver tudo sobre isso de maneira mais detalhada ao longo do vídeo. Então, espero que vocês assistam até o final. E é claro, se você curte esse tipo de conteúdo, já deixa o like logo no começo, se inscreve no canal e ativa o sininho das notificações para não perder os próximos conteúdos. Mas agora, vamos pro vídeo.
While the United States and Germany competed for influence in South America, Brazilian dictator Getúlio Vargas skillfully manipulated the situation to play both sides. He frightened observers in Washington with his fascist sympathies and friendliness to Germany, but frustrated the Reich with his refusal to be pliant. This game ends now. On August 22nd, 1942, Vargas declares war on Germany and Italy. World War II has come to South America. Here's how it happened. I'm Indy Nidell. Welcome to a World War II in real-time special episode looking at Getúlio Vargas's Brazil and the position of South America in the war. Getúlio Vargas, known by his initials GV, has been president of Brazil since a coup in 1930. While Brazil is still technically a democracy, Vargas has ruled by decree since 1935 after taking up emergency powers following a failed communist uprising. His political ideology is inspired by the fascist ideas spreading from Europe in the 20s and 30s, which we covered in our Between Two Wars series. He has bypassed the state and federal legislatures, neutered the powers of trade unions, and created and espoused his own form of Brazilian nationalism. Despite the anti-democratic nature of his regime, though, he does retain close ties to the U.S. This has been key to Brazil's economic growth after the Great Depression. He also sees the U.S. as a guarantor of security, especially against the long-standing fear that Argentina may lead Brazil's Spanish-speaking neighbors in isolating Brazil. However, Vargas's illiberalism and anti-communism soon bring him onto Nazi Germany's radar. A 1935 document produced by the Foreign Office sets out the benefits to Germany of closer ties with Brazil. Implicit in the Reich's attitudes to Brazil is the potential to undermine American influence in South America. Opportunity beckons for the German Reich to support Brazil decisively at this most important moment. Such assistance would bring Germany great economic advantages. Furthermore, it would lead to ties of friendship between Germany and the South American country with the most promising future. A trading relationship is formalized in an agreement negotiated by German Ambassador Karl Ritter in 1936. Brazil provides cotton, iron ore, coffee, and food staples. In return, Germany supplies Brazil with industrial machinery, military equipment, and coal. This lean towards Germany is mirrored with increasingly fascist-like developments on the domestic front. On November 10th, 1937, in a preemptive strike against the next year's elections, Vargas surrounds the National Congress with troops. He presents a new constitution to his cabinet, which formalizes the existing situation. The state and federal legislatures are officially dissolved and their powers transferred to the president. That evening, he proclaims the establishment of the Estado Novo, or new state, via radio broadcast, claiming that he is defending Brazil against communism, political violence, and mobsters. The press is censored, political parties are banned, the death penalty is reinstated, and state governors are replaced with Vargas loyalists. Many see this as a victory for fascism. The German press welcomes an ally in the struggle against Marxism. The New York Times writes anxiously of a fascist government in this hemisphere. But this does not mean everything is rosy in German-Brazilian relations. It's pretty widely known that Hitler and the Nazis are obsessed with creating a power base among the global Volksdeutsche population, and this concerns Brazil. It has as many as 200,000 people of German birth and another million or so with German ancestry. So the Nazis fund the establishment of the Federação 25 de Julio. It is an umbrella organization which, by the end of 1937, controls the vast majority of the 2,300 German societies and organizations in Brazil. This infiltration is a threat to Vargas's goal of a homogeneous Brazilian national identity. He begins a crackdown in December 1937, starting in the state of Rio Grande do Sul. The wearing of Nazi insignia and the production of Nazi propaganda is forbidden. Groups directly connected to foreign headquarters are ordered shut, and all foreign schools must begin teaching Portuguese. These efforts continue throughout January and February of 1938. On February 25th, German Ambassador Karl Ritter visits Vargas to protest. Fearing that the lucrative commercial relationship is threatened, Vargas goes on a charm offensive. Ritter reports, "The president, at the end of the conversation, expressed himself as he had previously done repeatedly in public in very friendly fashion towards the German community in Brazil." Vargas craftily uses the same meeting to ingratiate himself with the U.S. The version of events given to Ambassador Jefferson Caffrey and summarized in his cable to Washington, D.C. is very different. Ritter adopted an almost threatening attitude in regard to the recent measures taken against the Nazis here. The president replied sharply that he would not tolerate Nazi activities in Brazil. The ambassador then changed his tone and pleaded as a friend of Brazil. The president then told him that he should address his complaints in writing, and shortly thereafter terminated the interview. With the outbreak of war in Europe, Brazil continues to hedge its bets between the US and Germany. The Americans are quite happy when he signs the Panama Declaration, asserting the neutrality of the Americas on October 3rd, 1939. Yet he will soon set alarm bells ringing. On June 11th, 1940, the day after Italy declares war on France and Britain, Vargas makes a speech to mark Brazil's Navy Day. Rather than following Roosevelt's lead and condemning Mussolini, he seems to give coded support for fascism, stating that it is necessary to comprehend the new epoch and to remove the debris of old ideas and of sterile ideals. This speech is praised by the Axis, earning Vargas a congratulatory telegram from Mussolini. In typical Vargas style, he boldly claims to the U.S. State Department that he spoke for domestic consumption only and was not commenting on current affairs. This does the trick. At a press conference the next day, U.S. Secretary of State Cordell Hull asserts that relations with Brazil have never been more intimate, wholehearted, understanding, friendly, and cooperative than now. Vargas's fence-sitting is in common with the other major players in South America, Argentina and Chile, and is actually quite logical. The war is going in Germany's favor, and they are unsure of America's willingness or ability to defend their hemisphere. Argentina asked the U.S. to abandon neutrality and commit to the defense of the Americas back in April 1940, but this was rebuffed by Hull. Likewise, on June 12th, Brazilian Foreign Secretary Osvaldo Aranha asks the U.S. for cheap credit so he can buy weapons with it. But this is refused. The Germans are a much better guarantor of security. Another arms shipment bought on favorable credit leaves for Brazil on the 18th. But Vargas splits with his neighbors when Germany's total victory in Western Europe fails to materialize. By August 1940, Britain is still in the fight, and it looks like Germany is going to be stuck in a long, drawn-out war, which is surely bad for Brazilian business. Vargas continues to reassure the German embassy of his friendly intentions, but sees the U.S. now as a more stable partner and begins strengthening economic and military ties. On September 22nd, he decides to place all of Brazil's resources on the side of the U.S. He also accepts an American offer to build a new steel mill over one from the German firm Krupp. American relations warm up quickly. In July 1941, Vargas allows the U.S. to begin construction of air bases in Brazil's northeast, used for the ferrying of aircraft and supplies to British forces in North Africa. In October, a $100 million Lend-Lease agreement is made. Ties deepen further after Pearl Harbor in December. When the Pan-American response is decided at the Rio Conference in January 1942, Vargas complies with its recommendations and severs commercial and financial relations with the Axis. He also begins mopping up the extensive German spy network operating in Brazil. Astrid covered this operation, codenamed Bolivar, in her Spies and Ties series, so check that out to learn more. and about the Vargas diamond. You don't want to miss that. Anyhow, in contrast, Argentina and Chile refused to cut off relations and continue to harbor German agents. But although he has set himself apart from his neighbors, Vargas won't declare war just yet. He is quite worried about his rival Argentina and feels the U.S. hasn't offered the military support he needs. Argentina and Brazil have been competing for domination of Bolivia, and Vargas is afraid of an incursion along their 1,200-kilometer shared border. These misgivings are only reinforced by Argentina's continued association with the Axis and are given credence as Argentina begins strengthening its border garrisons in February. Vargas and Arana want assurances that in event of an Argentine-Brazilian conflict, the U.S. will support him. It's a recurring point of contention. For months, Arana pesters the Americans to stop buying tungsten, zinc, and wool from the Argentinians. The final issue is one of shipping. Germany begins sinking Brazilian vessels, making supply runs to the U.S. in January 1942, while leaving Chilean and Argentinian ones unmolested. Vargas wonders what Brazil gains by separating itself from the herd if Washington cannot guarantee Brazil's security. He demands that the U.S. institute a convoy system or provide defensive weapons for his ships. But this request goes unheeded. But as 1942 rolls on, he finally extracts significant concessions from the Americans that allay his fears. On March 3rd, a second Lend-Lease deal is signed after marathon negotiations, doubling the value of deliveries to $200 million. And after Vargas temporarily suspends the shipping arrangement, the U.S. Navy takes responsibility for their protection from April. He also receives clarification on the Argentine issue, with the U.S. agreeing to support Brazil in case of aggression. Vargas and Arana are now happy to cement the bilateral alliance, signing the Brazil-United States Political Military Agreement on May 23, 1942. Public pressure is also building rapidly for war. In August, Hitler orders an intensification of the U-boat campaign off Brazil's coast. Between the 16th and 19th, 6 ships, 4 being passenger craft, are sunk with 750 deaths. Brazilian society is outraged. Mass protests in Rio call for war. Swastika flags are burnt, and German and Italian businesses are attacked. Vargas appears on the steps of the presidential palace in front of an angry crowd and declares that his government will act energetically against the criminals. On August 22nd, he declares war on Germany and Italy. For now, Brazilian military operations will largely be naval escort duties in the Atlantic, with no major ground deployments until later in the war. But Vargas has now brought his country into this global conflict. Whatever the ugliness of his domestic policies, you cannot deny that he has been pretty clever about it. He has played both sides for as long as possible and picked what appears to be the winning horse at the most opportune time. It has all led to an intriguing twist of fate. A fascist leader joining the anti-fascist United Nations to fight a fascist coalition. As usual, national concerns trump international ideology. I mentioned that Spies and Ties episode about South American spy networks, and you can watch that right here. And join the Time Ghost Army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com so we can make more specials and bios like this one and like that one. That is what keeps us rolling. Do not forget to subscribe. See you next time.
Bom, como vocês puderam ver, é um vídeo muito bom, muito bem detalhado, muito rico em informações e expõe pra gente em detalhes como foi o contexto em que o Brasil acabou entrando na Segunda Guerra Mundial. E como o nosso presidente da época, Getúlio Vargas, era um cara astuto e muito habilidoso politicamente falando. Ele negociou com ambos os lados e no momento mais oportuno ele escolheu o lado certo para entrar na guerra, apoiando o lado dos Estados Unidos contra a Alemanha e Itália. É um vídeo muito interessante. Eu também fiz um vídeo muito semelhante a esse, porém falando do Brasil durante a Primeira Guerra Mundial. E também fiz mais 3 vídeos dos italianos falando dos pracinhas quando eles lutaram na Itália durante a Segunda Guerra Mundial. Esses 3 vídeos também estão muito bons. O vídeo do Brasil na Primeira Guerra Mundial também está muito bom. Se você quiser ver todos eles, é só dar uma olhadinha aí no canal. Mas é isso, se você curte esse tipo de conteúdo, se inscreve no canal, deixa o like se você ainda não deixou e ativa o sininho das notificações para não perder os próximos conteúdos. Muito obrigado por terem assistido o vídeo, fiquem todos com Deus e até mais.